This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, everyone. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast, where this month, January 2021, I am exploring gratitude and the many ways gratitude plays a role in our life. I was thinking about gratitude yesterday when I was having a hard time. And if you've been listening to the show, my most recent episode prior to my conversation with Jim McCarthy, I was talking about making a list of all the things to be grateful for. And when the tough times show up, or when you're having a bad day, you pull out that list, or you pull out the photo of the list you put on your phone and you read it and get into a gratitude mindset. And suddenly the challenges aren't as challenging. I was thinking about how I have had conversations with people who want to challenge the idea of gratitude. They call it a way of avoiding the suffering or trying to cover up suffering. And I want to make it clear that practicing gratitude is not about being happy all the time. Okay. It's not about turning every negativity into a positivity. Life is suffering. Everybody is struggling with something all the time. It's just the way it is. Even the people who look like, sound like they've got everything figured out are struggling with something. I was on my weekly mastermind call this morning, and we were talking about specifically the concept of turning pro, which is the title of a book by Steven Pressfield. I have talked about Steven Pressfield several times on the show. I have talked about turning pro, and I'm going to do an episode in the future specifically about the concept of turning pro. Within our conversation about moving from being an amateur to being a professional, the idea of numbing came up, and how in certain countries, in the Western world especially, it's far too easy to find ways of numbing out from the hard stuff in life. And I have heard it said by some people that I know. They say, yeah, it's great to practice gratitude. I get it, air quote, I get it, right? But that doesn't take away from the fact that we're living in a shitstorm right now. The American way of life is on the chopping block. We don't know who to trust. There's fake news left and right, on and on and on and on, focusing on all these things that are going on outside. And granted, these are things we need to be concerned about, because at the end of the day, if the container in which you have been living your life is suddenly destroyed, you are faced with a whole new set of circumstances, and it can be really, really, really hard to be grateful for that. Really hard. I have shared with you some personal experiences that during the time I was going through them, I was definitely not grateful. In hindsight, I can look back and say, for example, getting fired from my first real job. That was not pleasant. I cried my share of tears. I look back on that, though, and it was a turning point in my life. Had I not been fired from that job, I would not have then gone to enroll in a graduate program at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, where I got my master's in teaching degree. I would not have gotten the amazing job teaching that I did, because it's one thing follows another. This is what I'm getting at here. So out of something really traumatic and ugly and not wanted, something really good came from it. And I can be grateful for that. So my point here is I'm not trying to minimize suffering or struggle, because people are going through a lot of hard times right now. My point about looking at gratitude in relationship to us showing up, playing our positions, getting more from our one wild and precious life, doing work that matters, all these big themes of this podcast. Without gratitude, some of the better things that can come into our life won't, because the natural laws in their own seemingly magical way are going to not be in our favor. Gratitude is a tool that can help, I don't want to say strong arm natural laws, but in a way I'm saying we can guide the direction of our lives through conscious practices, including gratitude. Now, I was reading about the dark side of gratitude, or the people who say, I have a really hard time being grateful. And you may know people like this. I certainly do. There's one in particular who I feel like I'm always at least in my mind thinking, man, if you could just be more grateful for the little things that you have. And it turns out not everybody's wired for gratitude in the same way, just like not everybody's wired to play basketball or run a 4-minute mile. I mean, there are certain things that, based on our genetics, which is still a wide open field of exploration, and we're really at the forefront of understanding how all these little tiny genomes that are, we have trillions and trillions of these things in our bodies, and the combinations of them influence decisions we make, lives we lead, people we meet and get involved with, and so forth and so on. So again, nature is such a wonderful, complex set of parameters that we're always working with, either consciously or subconsciously. To me, gratitude is a way of consciously moving ourselves forward into more of what we want so that we can show up fully ourselves, do work that means something to us, and more importantly, means something to others. So if you've ever caught yourself either telling somebody, hey, count your blessings, remember how much you have to be grateful for, that can backfire with certain people. Processing life experiences through a grateful lens does not mean denying negativity. Sometimes telling somebody to be grateful is just the wrong approach. Even if you yourself know it could help, got to consider who it is you're talking to, and also what are they going through? Is being told to count your blessings really the message at the moment? Sometimes all people want is to be acknowledged that they're suffering. I used that tactic with my children growing up. Not always. I learned it through experience. It works. When somebody is suffering, for example, someone just lost their job because of the pandemic, or someone had suffered another tragedy of some kind, the last thing somebody in that circumstance wants to hear is, well, count your blessings. At least you have this. I've had people say that to me. It drives me nuts. It's like, no, that's not what I want to hear right now. I need you to acknowledge that I'm suffering, right? And then we can begin to diffuse the high emotion that I'm experiencing right now. Gratitude is also not a form of superficial happiness. Instead, gratitude means realizing that we do have the power to transform an obstacle into an opportunity. Timing is everything, though. And again, for those of you who are practicing gratitude and beginning to see its power, the last thing we need to be doing is telling other people, oh, just go be grateful. Just go be grateful. Now, I recognize that a couple episodes ago, I shared an activity with you that you could do as a means of helping yourself come down from a tough time because you have actively made a list of everything that you're grateful for in your life. When a circumstance gets heated, in whatever way that is, a way of diffusing yourself is looking at that list. Everything I share here I share with the spirit of this is for your consideration, not me telling you this is what you should do. This is what you need to do. If you don't do this, you will never advance. That's not what I'm getting at all. I'm exploring the power of certain concepts, certain laws, universal laws that we can tap into as a means of living a more fulfilled life. I was reviewing a letter I wrote to myself a year ago. And I don't know if I've shared this with you guys, but starting around December 2nd, 2019, I have been writing a daily letter to my future self. It's a practice that I had heard about and I wanted to try. And here I am 13 months later with a stack of, 375, probably closer to 300, almost 400 pages of these letters that I've written to my future self. And in those letters, I've explored everything under the sun. I was curious this morning after I wrote today's letter, I pulled out of the stack the letter I wrote on January 16th, 2020. And as I read that letter, I was thinking, wow, we didn't know about coronavirus yet. We had not experienced lockdown yet. It's really interesting to me to read between the lines and think about where I was mentally a year ago with where I am today, given all that has happened. And I know I've shared this before, and it's hard for some people to even wrap their head around, let alone believe is possible. But I wrote that letter, Dear 2020, and shared that with you all on January 1st of this year, and talked about my gratitude toward a year that was really, really hard, where loss was front and center all the time. It still is. If you turn on the news, you are going to be bombarded with statistics of loss constantly. And it is hard to transform all that negativity into positivity through gratitude. That doesn't mean it's not possible. And it doesn't mean that it's not a worthy ideal to go after. What it means is that we always have the choice of reframing a loss into a potential gain. We always have the choice of recasting negativity into positive channels for gratitude. We always have a choice. Change is inevitable, but personal growth is a choice. Gratitude is a tool we can use to achieve more of what we want. And again, it's not for everybody. It's something I have chosen for myself. And for all intents and purposes, I can report that it works. I can't say this is a deep scientific experiment with double-blind, placebo-controlled, gold standard kinds of tests here. All I can say is that when I actively engage that gratitude muscle, no matter what is happening, no matter how awful something is, I'm able to, even at a tiny level, transform the challenge, the suffering, the struggle into an opportunity for positivity, for generating a new idea, for seeing my circumstances from a different point of view. Like exercising every day, practicing gratitude every day doesn't come naturally or easily for everyone. That doesn't mean that it's not possible, again, through practice. One thing I know is true for me is that since I actively embraced a daily gratitude practice, my life is better. I don't fall prey to the negativity that is going on all the time in the rest of the world. I don't hide from the negativity. I don't pretend as if it doesn't exist. I don't use gratitude as a hole in the sand that I then put my head in and turn a blind eye to what's going on. I think that's one of the misunderstandings of practicing gratitude and also being positive, choosing to have a positive mindset is, there is going to be backlash. People saying, well, lots of people are suffering and struggling, and how can you be grateful for that? How can you find the good in that? And the law of polarity comes into play. I wouldn't know joy if I also didn't know misery. I wouldn't know euphoria if I didn't know the darkest night of the soul. I wouldn't know the wonderful feelings I get when I'm with my family if I was not without them for long stretches of time. So you see, it's the law of opposites that gives this life so much of its richness. And gratitude is a tool for amplifying the richness. That's what I'm saying here. And so if gratitude is new for you, or if you're having a tough time with it, that's okay. That's okay. Like anything, it does take multiple exposures, it takes repetition of an idea for it to begin to sink in, for it to begin to take hold in the way that makes sense for each of us. And your journey with gratitude is not my journey. And again, that's perfectly okay. If you can today find a way of expressing gratitude for something in your life, that's great. If today's one of those days where it's just not there, that's great too. I had one of those days earlier this week, and I did pull out my list, and I was thinking about things, and it was still hard. It was still hard because, again, guys, life is hard sometimes. We start small. If all you can be grateful for is the fact that you woke up this morning, wonderful, wonderful. It's a place to start. This is Mary Lou Kayser. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Got a great key offensive strategy you like to share? Write to us at coach@pyppodcast.com or on Twitter, use #PYP and let us know how you're running your ball into the end zone for those game-winning touchdowns.